Time is what a clock reads. Deltron Depris. Chapter 1, Part 1. Linda. The chemical factory could stay. He looked once more, in the glow of the green halo, over the smokestacks, switched on the DNA sequencer, and opened the neuromatrix replicator program. You still have time to cancel. Let it go. Hit that fucking button. The machine started. It loaded the cell data into a digital avatar, and opened the connection to the cerebral cortex. The body twitched, as its mind separated from the body, and the avatar loaded with the hacker's mind matrix. He was on the net, as a ghost that separated from its body, toward a virtual city whose name was only a legend to many of Deltron's inhabitants. It was night. Rain whipped the windows of the building, while Max was at the computer. The sirens of Depris sang their melody, and that dark note of despair filled the room with its ambience, like the last note in a lost game. Depris was raw. Its brutal streets and corridors did not care. Gangs ruled their own territories, sworn to their own ideologies which they followed, knowingly or unknowingly, willingly or unwillingly. They were slaves to a system whose prisoners and guards they themselves were. It was an established state, and nobody any longer knew how all of that had begun. Oblivion had wiped away the history of what the past streams had caused, when the deep net of the world of Telis 81 had been burned like a river, when one of Deltron's hackers had become sick of everything, wiped the accounts, emptied the boards, and dropped shit. What had existed then had been forgotten. Some guessed that Depris had been an old corporate core whose shopping malls and apartment complexes had been left to their own fate during Deltron's hyperinflation, and after that divided into blocks. Others suspected that the high plateaus had simply dumped the outer areas as useless when controlling them had become uncommercial as power and credit flows stopped. Depris could be saved. Nothing was simply done. Max tapped at his machine. He had found a link to a dark server in the satellite network, whose location he had searched for months. The machine connected, and the server answered. He did not know what to expect next, but a hacker's curiosity to solve the mystery that the boards memed on, the info automata, had awakened his curiosity. At last he had found what he was looking for, the Nexus core. 2 weeks earlier, Max sat in a hazard bar at the checkpoint between blocks 6 and 7. It was a place where hustlers from different blocks gathered to negotiate and do business in the names of their own guilds and cults. For Max, it was an opportunity to collect the data from the hustlers, while he worked as an operator in synchronizing the information points between the blocks. Anyone could load an update into an info automaton. Likes and negative feedback determined its place in the hierarchy of the newsfeed. Advertisements, gossip, political messages, whores, religious doomsday sermons, music, whatever, were available to be loaded directly from the info automaton into the user's consciousness. Max connected chips collected from the hustlers and loaded them into his deck, took a drag from his cigarette and put the next chip in, loaded the data onto the drive and repeated the same one by one, synchronizing the information points up to date so that the news between the blocks became updated on the sector's info automaton server. It was a way to maintain order. If the information points between sectors had been connected to the net, they would have been vulnerable, and only for that reason were trusted operators authorized to update them. Max was one of them. That night he encountered a message about the Nexus hidden in the lower feed. Do you want to live forever? Square 2 is an oscillation equation smaller than its endless root in the core of the Nexus. Come, fly to the Ghost City. Max removed the chip from the deck and placed it into a system administration tool. The program had been written to check for viruses against info automaton attacks. It was Max's own work. He suspected a virus. If it was a virus according to protocol, Max intended to remove it, but he still ran an analysis for the sequence that followed the comment. The analysis ended. Inside the distortion there was a hidden audio track comment. The Nexus is found in the soul. The hopeless lives without his capacity to calculate his route to the end. Come meet me where the kingdoms meet. Rex. That comment, behind whose username was Rex, awakened curiosity in Max's neural network. He felt how that message meant something he could not describe. Maybe it was his youth, or beginning schizophrenia, but from a 23-year-old one cannot expect that he has seen much of the world. That naive curiosity was a sign of passion toward life and toward the mystery that had met him. He packed the chips, distributed them back to the hustlers, and left the bar. It was 4 at night, but he had decided to travel to the area of Block 17, to the inner-city harbor gate that was called the Meeting Place of Kingdoms, to see the locals, in case one of them knew the person behind that mysterious username, Rex. The SkyTrain hummed. Its flight engine was antique, and another kind of flight engine was not to be expected in the outer area. Max lit a cigarette. From the train window, the skyscraper horizon of Deltron could be seen. Above it rose sky places for the super rich, who no longer had to grind alone on ground level. Max looked at its beauty as lines of aircraft traveled between the skyscrapers, forming lines of light in the sky, and dreamed of what he did not have. What kind of lives did they live, and what privileges did they enjoy? For a moment he could identify with the life of the rich, but a crash from the train engine woke him from that daydream. Deltron was Max's home. That megacity was a city complex that had been built on top of for hundreds of years. Max belonged to its poor, but he had managed to get himself a permanent job as an updater of the info automata and earned a reliable reputation among his guild. It was small, but that modesty decorated him like the humility that some considered divine. The cigarette burned. An announcement was heard. Deltron Block 17 station in 5 minutes. Max did not care about it. He lit his next cigarette and opened his hip flask. He took his drink and thought about himself. Cold sweat rose on his neck. Was it fear, or was it because of the dampness of the night and lack of sleep? He thought it did not matter, but he would still be doing something that he himself was not yet sure about. Max stepped out of the train. At the station it smelled of food. Exotic food, lake rats with vegetables, dog kebab, turtle and grasshoppers. Roll dog, he ordered. It cost only 4 microcredits. Cheap and good, he thought. Xian, he thanked, and continued his journey. Block 17 was right on the edge of the city. Beside it was a lake that could be mistaken for a sea. On the shore of the lake was a harbor and a bar where the Block 17 hazard people and edgewalkers stayed at night. Max headed there. He walked in that rainy weather, in the middle of the night, through that run-down and cramped maze of alleys, gnawing the edge of his kebab. Alley by alley, block by block, he drew no attention. A black overcoat, long hair, and eye optics made him completely ordinary on the sides of the streets of Deltron's Depris. On his belt, he carried a weapon, a C-12 semi-automatic pistol. The magazine held 24 rounds, and for bullets he used the Cyborg Sure armor-piercing FM-12 bullet. The kebab ended. He threw the trash on the ground and was already almost there. From a distance, the pounding of bass could be heard. The name of Block 17's hazard bar was Rajaporti, the border gate, because through its harbor one could travel to another city where Max had never been. In fact, he had never left Deltron. Most of his life he had lived on the edge of Deltron and Depris before the proper city began, in its apartment complexes and coffin hotels. Now that he could pay a small guarantee payment from his monthly salary for his guild's employee benefit apartment, he had settled down. The streets were still familiar to him from his youth, and gunfights were not foreign to him either. They did not, however, move that 182-centimeter tall man. Computers were his thing. The net was his world, and that was why he had come here. Max arrived at Rajaporti, where the bass pumped an 8-bit techno track. He nodded to the doorman, who nodded his welcome back to him, and opened the door for Max. The cold sweat had disappeared, and his aura was calmer from the alcohol he had drunk from his hip flask on the SkyTrain. He checked the situation. The bar was full of cult cyborgs, androids, and meatbags enjoying their last credits. The lights on Rajaporti's dance floor flashed to the rhythm of the music, and its walls were decorated by hologram patterns that resembled decorations from old-time 3D movies. The locals had gathered to exchange news, drink, dance, and forget, but Max was there for a different reason. He walked to the bar counter. It was old work, a traditional, classically styled pub counter. The bartender was a Latina woman with a metal hand and a tattooed face, and beside her was a blue metal disco droid distributing virtual fixes to customers who wanted them. VR emo trips, cheese, if real life no longer felt like anything, or the dopamine gates of the cerebral cortex were so worn from the crude realism of life that the only pleasure was to get a new fix from an experience, to be someone other than oneself, to be somewhere other than where one was. It was cheap, but deadly fun. Still, many inhabitants of Depris had no other way to escape everyday life. The dissonance caused by VR psychosis created dark states of mind, and once they struck, there was not much that could be done. Max signaled to the bartender, "I'm looking for a certain person. His name is Rex. Can you tell me where I could find him?" The bartender turned her gaze. "Walk through that door, if you want to live forever." He walked to the end of the counter and followed the advice to the back door, then climbed the stairs to the second floor, where a new bar opened. The bar had velvet sofas, and its style was elegantly calm. Its red upholstery directly seduced the viewer. The glass tables were round and illuminated. Hologram dancers decorated the dark corners of the room. A man and a woman sat on a sofa. Around them were gorillas armed with weapons. Company men, Max thought. The woman turned her gaze toward Max. Max would remember the depth of those eyes forever. Beside them stood a chrome-plated android with human but artificially looking features. The woman smiled. Max did not know how to react, but felt in his heart that warming smile the woman had created toward him. He stepped in front of the table when the android opened its mouth, and from its eye projectors a hologram of Max, from earlier downstairs, was projected onto the table. "Here is someone who is asking for you," it said. "How fine. My name is Rex. You found my message in the feed." The man wore an evening suit formed from green fabric plastic, with a red silk bow tie as his tie. 2 plug holes were visible on his forehead. He was a hacker. Max was opening his mouth, but Rex continued. "There were 2 reasons for hiding it. I wanted only a hacker or an operator to be able to find it." Max turned his gaze toward the woman. "Because you have come here, it shows curiosity and courage, so I am obliged to tell you about the Nexus. The Nexus is a road. Do you want to live forever? The Nexus is crypted onto this chip. I want you to open it and bring it back to me, and you will get to enjoy whatever you can imagine." The man looked at Max. He smiled with a lewd grin. "You look as if you have the ability to bring it back to me." The hologram dancers swayed seductively. Faintly, the sound of the bar downstairs reached their ears, playing a cheerful MIDI track. Rex extended his hand onto the table. "Here is the chip. If you bring it to me intact, I will reward you royally." Max nodded. "All right," he said. "Is that all?" The girl waved a chip in her hand. "My name is Linda. I just got one like it. Do you want to go downstairs?" The girl stood up and started walking toward the stairs while brushing Max's hand. "Cheese, cheese," echoed from the dim staircase downstairs, through which Max had arrived to meet Rex. Its neon lights and ultraviolet tone glowed into the corridor, through which Linda and Max walked away from the meeting room. "Cheese, cheese," was heard again. It was a greedy, dirty mouth, and the meat bag carrying it was curled in misery in the middle of the stairs. Max looked at him, and in his eyes could be seen terror and the glazed stare of psychosis caused by excessive use of emo trips. "No more cheese. Fucking junkies." Linda pushed the meat bag aggressively out of her way. The Depris junkyard was full of soft-headed virtual heroes whose neural networks had become dissonant from overuse of VR emo trips. It was cheap and short fun with long-term consequences. Smoke slid from the upper latch of the door at the bottom of the stairs, and Rajaporti's disco lights made it look velvety soft. "The junkyard was a bad place," Linda said. She turned her gaze faintly toward Max and spat on the ground. "Fuck the junkyard." "What about it?" Max said. "Don't you know?" Linda went silent and brushed aside the velvet curtain at the bottom of the stairs. "Fuck cheese." She looked innocent. The girlish gesture made Max cautious. Depris was raw. Everyone had their history, and it was not beautiful. The mental hospital landscapes in the Depris junkyard, with filthy psychonauts whose brains had been fried from sucking too many chips, were painful to watch. Soap, but it was not clean. That soap produced by the filth of emo trips brought to mind landscapes that were not there. It was its glow and darkness that broke the biological neuromatrix with metal and the shine of chrome, frying even the last natural memories. That was the price of emo trips. To be someone other than one was, to be somewhere other than where one was. Dangerously seductive. Depris, however, would not have survived without cheese, that daily dose of separating from melancholy and the state of chronic depression without which Depris would never have shown its face to its walkers. Who could endure those faces without cheese? No one. Some simply could not endure even a bit. It pulled into depths by which the mind is destroyed, separation from reality with a false identity that convinces its user that he is something. Everything is fine. You have love. You have power. You'd have hope. Depris was raw, and the only hope for many was that they would be left alone at the edge of their escapist daily battle. Among deals, work code, metal, and chrome, a VR chip was cheese. It was entertainment. Cheesy entertainment, but it smelled of a stink that knew death. Linda walked to the bar counter and called to the disco droid. "Cheese, what would you like?" said the droid in a mechanical voice. "Central City dealer, Paradise Holidays, family and friends?" Max looked at Linda. He put his hand on the counter and called to the Latina woman for a drink. Are you ever afraid of death? Linda smiled. VR death. My own special. The droid handed over a chip. A short and compact trip strengthens. A long and complex one burns. I want to see my own death. Max was shocked. That attractive and innocent-looking girl was crazy. We need to talk, Linda said. First I'm taking this. It took 3 seconds, and Linda's eyes shone. She was boosted, enraptured by adrenaline, oxytocin, and dopamine. She looked as if she were ready to lift an aircraft into the air with her hands and knock down a dozen cyborgs, tearing them to pieces with only her delicate hands. Techno played. The tune resembled the sound of a modem from the early days of the internet, and its electro bass stroked the listener's ego with its sexy melody. They walked to a corner, weaving among cyborgs, waiter droids, and meat bags. Max scanned Rajaporti's dance floor. Somehow he thought this place was strange. It was strange. It smelled worse than an emo trip. On the surface, everything looked normal. The Depris gang from Block 17 gathering, dancing and forgetting. The stage made room for a carpenter. He was taking his own and spread his arms, starting wild moshing. That woman got looks from her surroundings. Nothing new, nothing strange, but super. Max scanned the area. In the corner of the bar counter was a small dark space where a cyborg, dressed in a black suit, stood. Company men. What the hell were they doing here? Max knew Rex had made deals with them and decided to be cautious. One had to be cautious with companies. Even though Depris was allowed to remain in its discounted states, the companies had the power to change it. That did not seem likely, however, because all the juice that Depris's bars and body modders created with their modifications produced enough credit flow, power and balance for Central City and for the super rich on the high plateaus. Linda panted. She was still in states after the emo trip, and began to speak. Rex is not right. The Nexus code is hidden in the network. Its structure is encrypted from the upper net and we need each other to reach it. Max was confused. That woman spoke to him as if she had known Max for a long time and knew more than she had let him understand. There were people at the junkyard. They knew what the Nexus was. They had tried it. Confused shit, burned brains, no clear logic about what is what, but it is the link between the avatar and the body. With it you can get to Beldarusia. Max startled, just as if he had known what Linda had been about to say. Do you want to live forever? Max said to Linda. She jerked downward, and the same shine that had been in her eyes during the emo trip came into Linda's eyes. I live forever, and I die forever. Linda went silent. A sad ambience filled her being. Max felt it, but did not know how to say anything. He took a drink from his glass. On the upper screen was a news broadcast. A murder had happened in Central City. Police had isolated an apartment in an apartment complex, and news reporters surrounded the police chief, hoping for an interview. At this stage of the investigation, we cannot say anything, the reporter continued. Tom Haber, 54 News. Deltron Central City has once again met tragedy, and police cannot yet say anything at this stage. Have Depris gangs come to settle failed deals, or is this something else? Max thought a jealous boyfriend had killed his ex-girl while high on Central City fashion drugs. Who knows? Nothing new. It happens. It takes place. Dude, hey, come a little closer. You need to come closer if you want to take this thing all the way to the end. Linda pulled Max beside her and put a hand on his thigh. The melody had changed even more hardcore. It was industrial. The band sang a nihilistic saga about an animal that wandered in darkness, screaming its pain alone in the night. It suited Max. How do you want to take this case? I have to meet a guy. The Nexus is code, but that is not enough. Code alone does not open the gate. The sweat of fate rose on Max's neck. Was this planned? Rajaporti, Nexus, gate, bit overflow. He lost consciousness for a moment and woke when he felt pain on his face. Your plugs are lagging, dude. You went dark for a moment. Max took his drink and threw it down his throat. Scanned the situation. The cyborg had disappeared. Up on the screen he saw an energy drink advertisement. Boost 1 energy, when you need a boost in your sequence. The Matrix loaded an alert window. It was a call he did not expect, from an unknown number. He answered. This is Dev. Linda said you want to meet. She linked the line to your Matrix. Come out of Depris. I have a studio in Central City. Linda knows where. The woman smiled. That was Dev. Ready to sprint, he helps us build the gate. He knows where the wires need to be. Here's my number. Tag it tomorrow, and we'll arrange a meet." The screen advertisements ended, and the news channel continued again with the endless news broadcast from Deltron. Stock markets, scandals, politics, and a light ending item. A fat cyclist had cycled for 365 days on Deltron's high plateau to lose weight, and was now slim and fit. "If anything gives hope, that does," said the reporter, and laughed together with his co-host. "It happens, it takes place." The lights flashed to the beat, while meatbags moshed and pushed each other, as a dark electro-industrial track played in Rajaporti. Its DJ level was high above, and it was decorated by laser lights glowing with blue burn, radiating for the pleasure of the dancers. "Would you go dance?" Max looked at the woman. "If you want," he answered. "I'll drink this first." Max took a drink and swallowed the whole pint at once, standing up at the same time. "Come on, let's go." He walked after the woman while holding her hand. The pounding bass could be felt all the way in the heart, and it was easy to grab onto it, as the alcohol too was beginning to rise into Max's head. "Want to plug brainwaves?" Max looked at Linda. "Babe, my brainwaves are hardcore stuff. They're not easy to catch." He opened his matrix. From the GUI opened an interface from which to choose: VR experience, TV tune, radio, phone, game world, and settings. He opened the VR experience and switched on the shared trim synchronization program. "Call me. Now we go." The electro bass wrote a wild, deep sine wave. To its rhythm, Max saw something cute and delicate. It approached him with its silhouette blurred by haze and disco lights, kissing and dancing seductively. The woman pulled Max aside and took something from her pocket. They were 2 tablets of fashion drug modified for an oxytocin trip. She threw a kill into her mouth and offered the other to Max. "Now we only have to wait. Soon it kicks." The beat slowly changed into melodic ambience, singing epic lyrics. "There was a time when I met you," raising the atmosphere with a pulsing deep house beat that grew into a lift, exploding the dance floor. A trance-like state rose in Max's cognition as the disco lights changed their shape into a room with a bed covered in rose petals, large windows, a sea view, and a maiden dressed in a light-colored nightgown. "Who are you? I didn't know anyone was here." The maiden did not answer. She lowered the veil resting on her straps, and let it slide gently along her arms, down to the ground at her ankles. The bar lights flashed in Max's eyes, as the vision changed shape and he sank again into the journey, into the sight burned by fashion drugs, together with the woman to whom he had given his brainwaves. He saw the computer screen in his home, and the coding software with which he had written the antivirus program for the info automata. The display flowed oil-like, and he knew in his mind that its glow would disappear while at the same time feeling a touch on his shoulder. "Max, I am the one you have been searching for, my brother." "Babe, why can't I see you? I can't turn my head." He felt vomit come into his throat, but swallowed it back. "I can't turn my head," Max said to the woman rubbing his shoulders. "You just have to relax." The strobe flashed while Linda stared Max directly in the eyes and panted, excited by the danger and warmth she experienced. She sat quietly on the floor, seeing how Rajaporti's corridors changed shape into a street lane, decorated by augmented XXX advertisements. Megalotto, the round visual GUI brand logo of Primex Corporation, decorated by a llama animal wearing black sunglasses, and a man in a black overcoat, standing repairing a black bear alone in the rain. Cursing and stroking the teddy bear, the man lifted it into his arms and squeezed it strongly. The rain changed shape into a clear sky, and the man put the teddy bear down. Around him was dark green grass, whose edge was guided by the LED lights of the street curb. The man turned his gaze toward Linda and held an open palm toward her, as a gesture to come to him. They awakened on Rajaporti's floor in a sitting position, squeezing each other tightly until the trip began to recede and a state of confusion took hold of them. "Are you okay?" That was quite something. Max dug a cigarette from his pocket and lit it while sitting on the dance floor. He looked at Linda, turning his head at the same time to the side. "Shall we go?" He said it while pulling the woman up and starting to walk toward the disco droid, calling an order for 2 drinks, 2 shots. They sat in an edge booth to raise a toast and enjoy the music. Outside it rained water. It was fresh acid rain that always refreshed Max with its freshness. He had fallen asleep in Rajaporti. Linda had left, and drink after drink he had passed out in his booth between the legs of a hologram dancer, lulled into blissful ignorance. He woke to a headache and to the disco droid coming to offer him cheese. You look like you need some action, don't you? Your life doesn't seem to be going the way you imagined, does it? Max looked at the droid. Go to hell. He stood up and walked to Rajaporti's door. The bar continued its endless evening, as the foggy morning was already rising over Deltron's lake zone where the harbor was located. It was time for Max to leave. He and Linda were supposed to meet, and he had not yet rested enough. The headache and the come-down weighed on his mind, and Rex's words felt like a distant dream from childhood, more like a nightmare chasing him in the neurotic memory he had of life. A fate that he should fulfill, and that would become fulfilled. It was fatalism that Depris could not afford. It made even the cults tremble in terror. The despair that everyone felt in the waves of their wires was not something it was appropriate to talk about. It led to destruction. Destruction that was not welcome, not even in Depris. The rain faded, and the sun began to shine. Between the clouds, Max saw a majestic blue sky that he had not known how to admire in a long time. Rather, he had been stuck in his studio apartment for all the free time he had had, and had updated the block info automata at night when it had been quiet. The night sky was familiar to him, but he did not know the star patterns, not the planets and not the galaxies. He knew they were there. He knew many others lived in places where he was worth no significance. Their lives were on different planets in different star systems, in the spaces between stars, but he had never wanted to go there. The sky train hummed. In the pocket of his overcoat was the hip flask he had sipped on the way there, still some bottom left. Max looked at the end of the carriage, where young people were playing. They were dressed in innocent-looking laser techno outfits that resembled costumes more than real clothes. That was normal for young people. Young people were young. They had a lifetime to learn what they wanted to know. They played the newest VR game, some augmented reality. They traveled around Depris on sky trains from location to location, capturing flags and doing adventures that game masters had coded into the system. It calmed Max. He looked from the train window toward Deltron's horizon and took a drink from his hip flask. The peaks of the high plateaus could be seen as monuments drawing all the way to the cloud line as the train circled the ring of Depris. Soon he would get to rest. It was already time. He thought he would sleep until evening, but soon it was time again. There was always time for something. Something always happened. That was life. Continuous change, he thought. He felt lordship while looking at a cloud reflection and the golden edge drawn onto it. Life probably had a purpose. He simply did not know what it was. Live forever? Sure. Live only a moment. That moment contained a price that had to be paid, a price that every mortal would pay for his own life, for the sake of his own self, to become what one is. The young people played at the end of the train. They joked and teased one another. He turned his gaze once more toward the window. The train swayed. He switched on his audio plugs and immersed himself in music. Soon he was home. The sky train landed at Block 13 station. From there it was a few kilometers walk to Max's apartment complex. It was an old shopping mall that had been converted, after the business premises had ceased operating, into an apartment complex for the needs of Depris. On some levels there were still shops, relays for sale, weapons, prostitutes hanging around waiting for the next franc, gang members drinking, taking drugs, and the local cheese junkies messing around in their hallucinations with false identities ranging from world travelers to the super rich who were tourists only experiencing the hegemony of Depris. Max had to walk through Block 13 to his home in the mega complex that on the streets was called Hotel 13. It was his home. Its ground floor was reserved for one-night coffins, and on the higher levels were better quality rental apartments for trusted people of the guilds. Max walked the street, the same street he had walked for a few years, from station to station, while updating the info automata. Work, he remembered. Linda had arranged a meeting with him, but if he wanted to keep his apartment, the work had to be done. The work had to be done no matter what. He decided to rest for a moment and sleep until the afternoon, so that the night would have time for other things. There would be time to meet Linda. Neon lights, advertisements, and holograms filled the Depris shopping lane, through which Max took a shortcut toward the hotel. A drone flew behind him for a while, scanning, looking for something, examining. Max did not owe it anything. He had not done anything that threatened the guilds, cults, or gangs. The cops were corrupt local bosses, but they moved aside if a bigger fish jumped into the pond. They had no power to influence things. They got their salary, their power, their ego, but kept their mouths shut when told. There was always some hotshot there, and one idealist here and there. Otherwise they were mass. sacrificial lambs just like the ones they were supposed to protect. A siren sounded. Its howl made a high, sharp sound and then quickly stopped. Police had landed in their aircraft to patrol the street. They were looking for something, but it did not concern Max. One of the guild hustlers had put out a call. The police delivered. Street law came to take its right and show its place to anarchists waving power around. There would be several of them. Anarchists, true thinkers, idealists who saw through corruption and refused to submit to its power, weaving, crawling, hiding, fighting, concealing themselves in the streets, side corners of bars, cyberspace, and the coffin hotels of apartment complexes. They had their own reasons. What power struggles between the blocks prevented diplomacy from doing, anarchists were the best trade routes when mechanical politics produced no result. Information that hustlers did not get, hot metal, cheese or credit flows through the dark net, from free hackers for the benefit of the guilds. Whatever each one knew how to deliver. It was order when nothing else worked. It was not fair, but that was how it was. One did not have to like it. It began to snow. Deltron's winter was short and unpredictable. Now it was beautiful. It warmed Max's heart as the snow slowly fell in large flakes, covering the roofs of stalls, the surfaces of streets, forming for the walkers a snowbank through which to step. It traveled with the wind in swirls, forming arcs over which it again flew streamlined, adapting to the movements of the air and the shapes of the street. The neon lights of Depris shone magnificently in winter. It was a clean time for the city, whose small parks froze into the glow of branches of trees covered by snow, whose street stalls looked friendly in the cracking frost, whose ice rinks filled with skaters, and whose nearby mountain received winter sports people. The neon sign of Hotel 13 flashed in the snowfall. Below it were sliding doors into the hotel and a vestibule from which opened a more than 100-story mega-complex for the inhabitants of Deltron's Depris. Outside, gang members and whores hung around waiting, killing time and cigarettes. They watched the walkers, drank, and took cheese while waiting for the next customer, as new Alices in Wonderland, ready to carry out all the customers' dreams in their personality modes, with which the red light rooms took them into the deepest fetishes of the mind and BDSM whipping, eye optics and neuroports for cheese chips, and info automation loading stages, as well as neon shining hair represented those women in their glow. Max arrived at his home door. He was tired from the evening, hungover and in brain fog, and did not care about them as he walked through Hotel 13's sliding doors toward the lobby elevator. Linda. The harsh landscape that the mirror of his soul reflected into the superego changed as he thought about that beautiful woman, Linda. It had made him feel something that differed from the everyday life of Depris. Was it something worth fighting for? It was something new. He had spent his whole young life alone, inside a room, at night walking in shadows through info automation factories. He felt a connection to that woman, but it made Max feel more ordinary and less exceptional as an individual. He was not sure whether it was a good or bad thing. The elevator made a chime, and residents of the hotel left the elevator before Max could step inside. Floor 84, he pressed the button, and the elevator began to accelerate its rate of ascent until the floor felt normal again. Bing came from the elevator's factory sound when it arrived at the floor Max was waiting for. He was prepared for corridor rats, neighbors who spent time in the stairwells of their own floor gossiping and talking empty things, until a call came from the guild's hierarchy of needs for each one to do favors and little jobs through deals and transports for the benefit of the sectors of Depris. Max swiped the keycard, and a metal sliding door opened in front of him, opening a view into where he had devoted his whole life. Home, the computer, the bed, and avant-garde neon light 3D visuals that surrounded the apartment with their glow. He threw his overcoat onto a hook. He left the pistol belt in place in case something unexpected happened. It was unlikely, but there was always a reason to take care. He went to lie on his bed, thinking about Linda. What had that woman said? Do you want to live forever? Those hairs moving with her neck, the girlish dark appearance, wild nature, but there was something beautiful and breakable in her. Max had to sleep off his tiredness, but a sense of duty weighed on his neck. The work had to be done, but now it was morning, and he lay hungover in the bunk of his apartment complex, dreaming of a woman unlike anyone he had ever met before. Max turned onto his side and wiped his forehead. Eat and go back to the hazard bar between 6 and 7 to see whether there might still be new chips, visit the info automata, and update the loading console. He switched on the TV tune. It was a device like an old television, with which it was possible to wirelessly share emotions that the characters on television felt. Max did not open the line. He tuned the channels until he finally rode onto the station he was looking for, Nature Planet. A documentary about tropical rainforest birds was playing on the station and showed images of cliffs where parrots nested, eating clay from their slopes. Max left the sound on. The subject changed to a description of the life living in great rivers in environments completely unknown to the inhabitants of Depris, in water cloudy from mud. The instant noodles were ready. He sat at his table to eat steaming noodles with chopsticks. Thoughts spun in his mind. Why had he gone after the Nexus? Did it make any sense? Everyday life went normally. He got to be in peace at home, do work, and entertain himself through the computer and the net. The Nexus, however, fascinated him. And now the woman he had waited for his whole life without knowing it, knowing that one day he would have to find what he was searching for. It was fate into which he lulled himself in his peculiar life in the nights of Depris, that one day everything would be normal. The snowfall had turned to sleet, and a gray ceiling of clouds covered the sky. He looked out of the window, as lines of aircraft disappeared into mist, popping out of it and disappearing again into the gray cover of cloud haze. It was calming to watch. He dreamed of the tropics, and Linda together at a waterfall in a green forest, enjoying starlight while tropical birds sang their paradise song, their own praise, the harmony of man and woman in a primitive but so fulfilling environment, in an atmosphere of warmth and high humidity, and slowly moving days without pressure to survive, or the shit that Depris had a habit of throwing onto the neck of every one of its citizens, willingly or unwillingly. The matrix beeped and the GUI flashed a call window in front of Max's eye optics. It was Linda. "Hey dude, are you awake already?" Max startled. He remembered how Linda had given him a kiss on the cheek before leaving Rajapurdi, while he was already half asleep at the booth table as techno princesses partied on Rajapurdi's floors. "Got to go to work," Max answered. "All right then, if you want, we could see each other today in Central City. Dev has a studio there if you remember. He can help us. I have a plan. Let's meet there. What time can you get there?" Max thought for a moment. It was now 10 in the morning, and doing the work would take him at least until 2. After that he had to rest. "How about we meet at 6 at Central City Sector 2 station? I'll beep you when I'm there." "Okay, that works. See you there." The Matrix cut the connection, and he continued emptying the noodle cup and sipped the last remains down his throat by tipping the edge of the cup to his lips, drinking away everything that was left. Excellent, he thought, while at the same time putting his hand into his pocket. There was the chip Rex had given him to decrypt. Why was it crypted? And why had there been gorillas wearing suit vests at the place? Max sat at his computer console. He placed the chip into the control port and opened the bus to feel whether the machine recognized the chip connection. It rolled for a moment and identified the chip as King Control 1, a megachip sending about 512 tera per second. Copying would take about half an hour, after which he would get to analyze the contents. Max left the chip alone and began gathering his relays with him. He put the cigarette pack into his pocket while lighting one. He took long drags, letting the warming feeling spread into his chest and blowing the excess out while breathing heavily. It was time to go. The checkpoint 6 and 7 hazard bar waited for its operator at night, but today was an exception day. The news between sectors had to be updated so that the information lanes would fill with new things, and events in the outer areas would be heard from one street level to another. Max was responsible for that together with other operators, synchronizing the info automata between sectors 1 and 13 in Depris. The high plateaus in Central City had been divided into their own blocks. Their hierarchy and order was harsh and disciplined on the public lane. The plateau guilds were strongly protected by the unforgiving hand of law, and even small bodily damage to a member of the upper caste of the high plateaus gave a Depris guild member a death sentence. The high plateaus were not like Depris. Its dark melancholy contained desperate streetwalkers, protected only by the cash flow of their guild hustlers, and the internally written law that bound guild members to follow the code under which they had settled to operate. The law was not the same for everyone. It was the same only for those who had committed themselves to the same guild by sector, and the common order staircase placed the law in disputes between different sectors on the side of whoever was higher in influence. On the high plateaus ruled the law of the high plateaus, and in Depris its own, and in every sector the moral structures of its internal guilds, bound by customs and punishment clauses and the duties and freedoms of work. Linda sat in the armchair of her home, browsing gossip about Deltron celebrities from her newsfeed, listening to childish music, and sipping mango tea into her hangover. Images from yesterday with Max flashed into her mind, from the emo trip to the disco lights and party metal that she still tasted in her mouth as the taste of blood, joining the after kicks of the emo trip. Today it was time to live, but she felt as if death were breathing on the back of her neck, with its cold iron breath, with its beautiful gentle blow. The augmentation of the eye optics projected dancers onto the floor of the cave, and the edges of the feed filled with advertisement banners that rolled around the ceiling corners of the apartment, now and then popping colorful clickbait into the intermediate space. She left her tea on the table. It was a black, glossy, one-legged table, edged with a copper rim, on top of which Linda had placed the connection point of her holo projector. The holographic cannon worked like a TV tune, but projected a three-dimensional image above the projector that could be examined from every corner of the room, seeing the image colorful and genuinely glowing. She was still in her underwear, in small thongs that barely covered her pubic mound and praised her round butt and long legs. She drank her already cooled tea in one gulp and walked into her small bathroom closet in front of the mirror, thinking it was time to get ready. The virtual assistant activated. "Good morning, Linda. What kind of makeup and hair would you like today?" The assistant's theme menu began to modify the mirror image according to different alternatives, with the artificial intelligence fitting them to the shapes of the mirror image. Her small nose became covered with cream, her young ears were decorated with a drop jewel, and her round lips got black and orange lipstick over them. The eyelids became painted green and the eyes with black mascara. Her lip got a small beauty mark, and in her hair she put curls decorated with a greenish streak glitter. On her neck she sprayed fruit-scented perfume, which she rubbed into her hands and bare breasts. She looked at herself once more in the mirror, swinging her head happily and smiling at herself. Ready. The artificial intelligence closed the Getting Ready menu. "You look beautiful today, Miss Nowak." Linda smiled. She was happy. The hangover had disappeared, and the darkness of mind that had troubled her all morning had taken a turn after she had dressed herself for herself. "Max." She licked her lower lip and opened the gooey interface to call that man through the matrix. The call was short, but it made Linda feel excitement about this day and about meeting him. Leather trousers lay on Linda's living room floor. Their dragon patterns had been fitted to glow under UV light. She put on the trousers and pulled a black hoodie onto herself as she prepared to leave Depris and ride to Central City to meet her friends. She had known Dev for a long time, since childhood. They had grown up in the same orphanage in the area of Depris Sector 13, in a charity dormitory. Velimieli was the orphanage of the Depris junkyard, at the end of which was the home street of the virtual magicians of Depris, a child psychiatric residential home run by the Sector 13 Body Modders Guild. It had been sunk among long corridors onto a blue-red neon street whose ends were decorated by cult fortune tellers and personality analysts called virtual magicians. The virtual magicians used artificial intelligence together with personality analyses, speech and behavior modulators to study and predict fate, making their customers perform behavior tests that looked random with their hologram mirrors, drilling into the premises of the mind, predicting, limiting, and widening what a person was capable of doing in life. Some of them believed in fate, some in free choice, chaos, or the boundary between the unknown, predetermination, and freedom. They were not unanimous about the nature of the universe, but all of them tried to control it, looking for the interface of what was the real relationship between metal, chrome, flesh, and wave packets breaking apart in probabilities in human life, together with the potential of indeterministic fate and the superdeterministic interface. In Linda's opinion, the wisest of them believed in a superdeterministic interface, where an individual's potential indeterminism was reflected as free fate to do what one wanted to do, learning something new with the surface of what is good and right. Beautiful harmony that fulfilled what was needed in measure and amount in the way the truthfulness of the situation required at each moment. Linda did not care what else they thought about it. She had seen how fatalism had, with its falsehood, destroyed minds full of cracks into the carnality of self-deception, and the destruction of intuition in the upper mind. Velimieli, she thought. Dev used to carry marbles with him. He played with them with the other boys of the home in spring, when the snow had melted and the park fields began to fill with puddles. It was an innocent time of childhood, when sister and brother sat at the orphanage dining table, eating chicken noodles and playing new augmentation adventures together with the other children of the orphanage. Linda started the speeder. It had been her beloved for years. When humanity discovered tachyons, they learned to bend faster than light dark space to their own advantage, and build flight engines that bend spacetime and thus break the slavery of gravity. With them one could fly fast, speed through tunnels or on the roof of the sky. Linda's speeder was a Dragon Z800, whose interface equipped with a neural portal helped drive it either manually with the body or mentally with the power of images. Linda held tightly onto the control handles as the spacetime of Tellus 81, traveling in the gravity of the Ackermann binary star, curved from the lens of the tachyon gravitron engine, lifting Linda's Dragon into the air as she began accelerating into a connecting tunnel toward the Central City studios to meet Dev. She accelerated the Dragon to 200 miles per hour and raised altitude above ordinary cars, weaving with her gravitron engine over the roofs of cars, at times gaining height and at times going low, brushing the magnetic road. The speed lane ran under her feet as Linda traveled through the tunnel in the flashing traffic lights toward Central City. A police aircraft, however, made her restrain her pace at an interchange when the tunnel ended and a new branch separated toward the urban techno-zone of Sector 7. That area was a residential area for semi-rich and well-off Deltron citizens, where Dev had moved a few years earlier after founding Nano Studio. Dev made relays. He knew everything one needed: connect, cut, fix, patch, and build. A holocannon, gravitron engine, or customization of Neuralink plugs, it was all his bits. Wires on and go. Linda rode along the straight, bright speed lane toward the parking garage of Nano Studio's apartment complex, which recognized the parking signal of Linda's speeder and opened the door for her. She left her bike in Dev's space and locked it with face recognition locking and an audio scanner. "Stay," she said it, and the bike locked itself into sleep mode. The parking garage was full of fine aircraft, neuro-controlled speeders, magnetic cars, and a few old classic cars using combustion engines. It was illuminated with green neon tubes to show the status that the users of the parking garage had gained when moving into suburban Sector 7, far from Depris. It represented glow and massive culture that was not seen in Depris. A parking garage guard dressed in a uniform stood at the elevator door, smiling subtly and showing Linda welcome as she smiled happily back. She felt privileged. The elevator door opened. An advertisement screen flashed an over-cheerful and vibrating soap advertisement that made hair sparkle. Luxury 2382. What changed when people reached the stars? Different planets and new star systems. The same advertisements still bombarded consumers with their fine products, competing for their share, grabbing a strip from the pastry that seemed to run out every time. The Federation banking system was faulty. It closed money flows from competitors and service producers for whom credit flows were created from nothing in pursuit of interest. It made systems boot, angry toward one another, zero sectors and empty orders without a user. Cities had been built on new Tellus planets into emptiness, into dead spaces where nobody had ever moved. Trillions and trillions of credits wasted, out of someone's pocket to rock freight flows, relay factories and workers and their borrowing. A wasted brush inherited emptiness and at the same time knocked down many other dominoes in its nickel stream. Linda pressed a button. Floor 49. The elevator's factory voice announced it. She was excited about meeting Dev and about having found an operator skilled in coding, the kind she and Dev had been searching for. The net was long and wide, but the real stuff was found only in meat space. The elevator door opened. Before her eyes descended the view of Nano Studio's reception, where orders and assignments could be asked from the secretary, from unusual gravitron engine repairs to repairs of AR mode eye optics. Linda waved a hand at the receptionist, who recognized the girl as she walked past toward the owner's apartment in the back. Dev was doing his own things. He was focused on soldering a traditional circuit board that was intended to function as the control module of an AR chip. The optical system into which that switch system had been integrated was sophisticated and delicate. Its total dimension was under 2 nanometers, which in past times had been considered the border gate of modern information technology infrastructure. At least some considered it that. Linda stopped at the door of Dev's workroom. She admired everything the days of the orphanage times had produced, and nothing was gone. "My brother," she shouted. Dev did not react immediately. He knew that familiar, happy, girlish voice. It was his sister Linda. Dev lifted his gaze from his soldering point, raised the digital magnifier and moved the mechanical interface control glove from his hand. "My darling," he said. Linda laughed. "Do you know what day it is today?" Dev looked at her questioningly. "We found the soldier." Dev turned the control module rod out of the way and looked at Linda seriously. "He is an operator," Linda said. "Depris or what? Did you know Greta hates gangs?" "How so?" Linda said. "Think about it a bit. She cut the connections to her clients, all gangs. They only seek an opportunity. A whole bunch of fortune seekers, killing everybody wild, unnamed. Fuck, Dev, we have to reach Greta. You know it. She coded the Nexus. I can't say what she hates, but not us. Besides, she doesn't know us, but we love her. Fuck that shit. Everything here is gangs. Everyone only looks for their own advantage. You are no better than them." Dev looked at Linda. "Then so be it. We know Greta is a coder, and without her we cannot open the Nexus. Whatever, maybe this guy of yours can help us. I have somewhere to go today. You can come with me if you want. There's a fashion show at Putka today. Lovely flesh and bone, sexy fat. You coming?" "I guess." Linda sat down on Dev's work chair and stayed spinning in it. For a moment she dreamed about how Max would sit beside her in the sensation of Putka's fashion program, and they would hold each other while the shared VR experience guided their sensual senses. Putka's program had been made on TV Toon channels. A fat prima donna ate meals while a thin and lively young woman posed, through a shared experience in the prima donna's culinary pleasures while dressed in sexy outfits. The audience could watch and tune into the prima donna's pleasure by emotionally joining the model's experience in the oral and sexy pleasure of sensations that they experienced together. Dev threw the glove onto his table. He sat beside Linda, opening his LED display while switching it out of power saving. He checked the chat window, 24 messages, all business, all good. "Did you know Brandy Lola is coming there today?" "Ooh, she's wonderful. 120 kilos of rich loveliness. And her partner today is Deltron's model cast newest arrival, Marisa Libanow, the hottest stilettos in latex. Can you imagine?" Linda laughed. "Looks like you can't wait, as if you knew." Dev smiled smugly at Linda. Max left the lower lobby of Hotel 13 back into Depris, his destination the hazard bars at the checkpoints of 6 and 7. It was time to fulfill duties. A random nobody greeted him at the outer door at the bottom of the stairs, and Max greeted him mildly back while smoking the cigarette he had just lit. The hum of the ventilation ducts still reached his ears outside the sliding doors, where he had stumbled in his hangover. From there, he continued along the hotel's side alleys toward the SkyTrain station. Snowfall dropped flakes onto Max's neck, and a cloud ceiling covered the sky. It was cold. He lifted his gaze toward the roof ridge of the apartment complexes, took a drag from his cigarette, and at the same time raised his shoulders to protect himself. A megalotto advertisement of the 7 Days kiosk flashed in a window that had filled with tags and slogan stickers that young people of Depris had pasted onto its surface. Max stopped to look at the flashing banner. 26,000 billion Federation credits. The game covered all the Federation's Tellus planets, and its winners had their own city on the surface of Tellus 1, on Earth. A red retro rocket flew in the advertisement banner, carrying the winner's family in an animation to the planet every Megalotto player dreamed about. It was a wet dream of happiness and success, by a twist of chance in a cold universe whose stellar plasmas were the only shelters for human life. Max turned from the neon alley onto a rundown side path, whose sides were decorated by the trash bins of apartment buildings. He saw a taxi in the distance. The laziness of walking from station to station tore at his soul, and the desire for comfort made him decide on a different route. The taxi hovered gently just above the street, at the same time making an electric humming sound. It was an air taxi, covered in a checked pattern, decorated by an overall green color. Max knocked on the air taxi pilot's window, and the door opened to the back seat. "Where does the journey go, traveler?" On his head, the driver had heavy, vision-shielded augmentation glasses that helped in coordinating the craft. The driver flicked a hand toward the brim of a cap resembling a trucker cap, and brushed blue-black hair behind an ear. "Sector 6, the hazard bar at the SkyTrain station." The lights dimmed inside the air taxi, and the heavy metal music returned to normal level after automatic muting, as it began to rise vertically upward from street level, finally passing the roof structures of the apartment complexes and steering onto the aircraft highway. It accelerated to 100 miles per hour, traveling as part of a line on Deltron's Sky Road. Through the windows he saw the horizon through an augmentation, that connected the air road to the interaction of commercial advertising flows. In its brightness, the corporate advertisement banners along the route were reflected into Max's eyes, floating in a digital matrix in the taxi windows. Past them he saw the misty hologram walls of Central City skyscrapers, where gigantic three-dimensional shrimp advertisements hundreds of meters tall were drawn to tempt those who witnessed them. He was thirsty. The Sector 6 SkyTrain station approached, and the taxi moved from the air road intersection into a landing maneuver. It dropped from a height of hundreds of meters, back along a vertical track to a level of the planet's surface, and stopped. Max swiped a credit card that he had received as a guild work benefit for unexpected events, and left the place. Peace out. He lit a cigarette. The Checkpoint 6 hazard bar was open night and day. It was called Lingerie after the street title of the place's owner and line leader, Boris. He was a hard case who had been in the war and the border battle between Sectors 7 and 6 decades earlier, gathering reputation and glory as a fearless field soldier and a group leader with combat instinct. Boris acted as leader of the Riva Pasket gang, which included hundreds of soldiers and thousands of subcontractors. Ethnically, his complexion resembled the appearance of an Ossetian man. Dark, thick mustache and dragon tattoos on both sides of the face. His hands were titanium-reinforced cyberarms, whose extra modes included 2 half-meter-long cutting blades and automatic pistols embedded in the backs of the palms. Max threw the cigarette onto the ground. It went out quickly as snowflakes hit its burning surface. Factory-like metal doors were the decoration of Lingerie's entrance. Above them, on an iron plate, was welded the text Lingerie, reddish in tone from rust. At the door stood a gorilla in a pilot jacket and black trousers. He had a bald head and trained arms. Max knew the protocol. He had visited Lingerie regularly for several years, in the late night and early morning, when the hardest partiers had left the place. It did not bother him. Gang members occupied Lingerie's yard with their speeders, bragging and drinking lagers while women inspired them to flex and take honor from one another. Max raised his chin toward the doorman. From the front of the entrance opened a long corridor with a carpet formed in red ornamental patterns. Small lamps guided tightly toward the end of the corridor, where there was a saloon door. Max loved that corridor. It was his space journey to a new reality in the harmony of Depris. Downstairs, there was a bar counter, lined with small round black leather seats, placed tightly against the illuminated wall of the counter. Meat bags and cyborgs hung around on those chairs and beside them. Green-haired, blue-haired, brunettes, fake blondes, mohawks, and hazard people dressed in latex, plastic, and fabrics hung around sipping their drinks and listening to deep, fast-tempo death punk. Max sat at the counter. An order window of drinks and small snacks opened on an LED display in front of him. Shrimp burger, squid rings and fries, sausage and buttermilk sauce, and vegetable noodles. Max extended his hand to the display and swiped it to the drinks list. Lingerie Special, Blue Death, vodka, lime, and blue color. It suited as a leveler. From Lingerie's entrance marched a woman dressed in a sophisticated jacket and equipped with transparent augmentation glasses. All business. She looked like a hustler who had come from Central City to handle matters with local gangs. Relays, weapons and goods, and writing new contracts. The woman turned her gaze toward Max, who had been left staring at the woman's augmentation glasses. Without making a gesture, she marched past Max with an arrogant attitude Max knew as the spirit of corporate hustlers. He did not care about it. He took drinks from his glass and wiped the corners of his mouth. He waited for the inner world to call him to walk into the back room and look for Boris. Another drink. It would not hurt. All business. A disco droid served Max another shot of vodka that remained standing on the table when Lingerie himself arrived. Max, you are early, operator. There isn't much data today. He handed Max a gray, metal-edged case. It was an LED-lit case, whose blue lights formed the words Data Hazard. Max scanned the optical code of the case, which resembled an old-time QR stamp with his eye scanner. It opened in front of his eyes the serial number, the date when the case had been sealed, and the number of chips. 14 chips. That would take only a moment. He took his synchronization tool from his backpack, a fused electronic system, Silicon Zerka 6.0, on which the Info Automata System Administration Tool program was run in a user-led way. He plugged the chip into the deck. Zerka recognized it as an Info Automaton memory card and began running data analysis for possible illegalities, viruses, malware, and other information-phishing harmful programs. A yellow loading bar flashed on the deck's display as it ran the data analysis. Done. A green correct mark appeared on the deck display. The chip was clean. Max took it out and returned it to factory state while placing it back into the case. The stink of tobacco reached the sensors of his nostrils, wonderfully aromatic and seductive. He could not resist it. He was in the operator's intoxication and was used to smoking while working. Chip after chip, he checked the memory cards and loaded the new information onto Zerka's disk. It was time to go to the info automaton. "Hey dude, want a party?" The woman was dressed in a Gothic-style black torn shirt, whose logo was a digital skull surrounded by a red triangle. She belonged to the Cybervolt Guild's working women and worked long days in lingerie, in its coffins with her customers who flowed into the place, quick and rapid from the conveyor belt. Max looked at her intensely, scanning the woman with his eye optics. Nothing alarming. Now, however, there was no time for this. He felt guilty. Linda had remained burning in his neural network after the previous evening in Rajaporti, and he did not want to detach from that feeling. "It's ready here." He signaled toward Boris, tapped the case, glanced at the girl, and looked once more toward Lingerie's infamous keeper, before starting to walk toward the exit. Subconsciously, he put his hand on the pistol grip, but realizing himself, he let the hand continue its movement. Max walked outside. He was pissed off. A huge feeling took control of him as he hit Lingerie's outside wall with his hand. Blood ran from his knuckles. Past him flew a gang speeder equipped with a gravitron engine that landed a little distance away in the parking area among the other Sky Raiders of the rival Paysket. They looked at Max like he was crazy. He raised the shoulders of his overcoat to improve his feeling. Full on in the face. All business. The air taxi landed in the yard of Sector 7's shopping paradise. Its info automata were connected to the local network through the control center where Max was headed. He was pissed off. The quick vodka he had drunk in Lingerie began to go down at the same interval in which it had given a kick when he arrived at Pop Mall. Pop Mall. It was the playground of hundreds of corporate chains. From there, money flowed into the accounts of shareholders of the high plateaus, through the slave-like consumption of Depris, dominated by image and visibility in the identities of its targets. Olgram Sports, We Are One, Riffing Electrodex, Be Different, Vade Health, Find Your Inner Peace, Rock Cafe, Rock Your World. All the same. The same chaos that lulled consumers into a world where they had order, into a forgotten bubble where me in the center of the universe satisfied carnal egoistic mental images and bodily needs with a passion, resembling fanaticism on the playing field of social Darwinism. An empty oasis at the edge of the savannah, from which animals can draw water in their thirst, like an identity without image, stamps or words in pure existence with oneself, free to draw, from the creativity of the soul, the meanings of one's own purpose. That bliss, not many got to enjoy that bliss anymore, except from time to time, on top of a speeder carried by the sky streams, or in virtual space in the cities of matrices where there was no threat and no lack. In those cities Max had spent his youth, when there had been free time. In those cities he had friends, and in those cities he was at home. He stopped for a moment to look at fluorescent advertisements and LED displays before continuing toward the control center. A quick scan, the door in front of him opened into a corridor leading to the back room. From there, toward the operations room from which the info automata were controlled. He walked the corridor until he arrived at a door. Control center. He swiped the scanner card again, and a small green light lit above the door handle. He stepped into that room smelling of electricity, cables, and cigarettes, where only the operators of Depris visited at night. He settled at a display terminal and connected Zerka 6.0 into run mode. He pressed the button, and the machine began connecting new settings into the info automaton network. He was relieved. The familiar, safe routine made him feel peaceful, and that small moment of bliss in doing his work correctly was something one had a right to enjoy. The machine completed the load, and Max checked the contents of the feed out of curiosity. Putka advertisements announced a new fashion show. Marisa Libanow, hot latex, would be expected in shared experience for edgewalkers who wanted it, and for the elitist culinary people of Central City. Clickbait. Cheap advertisements that barely offered anything except more advertisements. Subscription lists that offered only more and more dreams of reaching quick money without ever reaching it. Money is never quick. Max had learned that. Everything requires its work, and everything had its price. He removed the Zerka 6.0 tubes from their plug places and packed it into his work backpack. He took a drag from his cigarette and stubbed it into the ashtray on the table. In his mind, he saw a latte cup from Super R Cafe, toward which he began to walk into the shopping paradise of the shopping center from the control center. The door opened onto a shopping square that hummed from the hurry of its customers. Young people had settled to hang around on benches along the lanes. Max continued toward the cafe, while listening through his audio plug to calming jazz from past times, from ancient soundtracks. For a moment he felt the need to stop at the shopping center street edge, light his cigarette, and enjoy the mass of people together with the jazz track. He opened the iOptics GUI with Linda in his mind, to whom he wanted to send a beeper message. "Hey babe, I'm at the mall, work is done." Chapter 2. Linda and Dev sat in the back room of Nano Studio talking. Linda stared at the neon tube advertisement on the wall of the workroom where, in green and blue text, hung the sign Nano Studio. The edges of the workroom were full of electronic junk, cardboard boxes full, and everything looked unfinished except Dev's work table. She reached forward and switched the GUI on. Linda had a habit of playing with the news and social media feed of the iOptics GUI, browsing it to spend her time every day. Deltron's celebrity feed was a vacuum whose endless drop took one into a world of desires, gossip, and twisted jokes, where every woman of Depris visited every evening. More pictures of Lisa. More pictures of Lisa. Lisa's boyfriend had been rude to the sensation media surrounding her and hit a TV Toon Gonzo journalist fishing for 3D flow in the face. You get what you order. It was day. The snowfall still whipped Deltron, and it had grown stronger while Linda and Dev had been hanging around at Nano Studio. The news feed fed material about accidents, and the weather forecaster promised a snowstorm. Linda opened her mobile device and began going through pictures she had taken the previous night with Max at the bar. She lulled herself into the memories that night had brought with it, and remembered that black teddy bear that the man in rainy weather had hugged. It felt home-like to Linda. The lobby buzzer beeped. Customer call. "Good day, how's the slang?" A young man wearing a colorful fanboy shirt came inside carrying a cyber arm in his hand. Dev turned his gaze to the arm. "This needs tuning." Laser projector into the back of the palm. Dev received the relay and looked at it, examining it. "Basic set, won't take long. You can wait here or in the lobby. I'll nail it into place." Linda looked at the customer and leaned in her chair. She had lifted her legs onto the table and glanced in passing at the new customer who had arrived. The boy smiled confidently, raising his eyebrows. She felt indifference even though she was used to flirting with Dev's customers. She turned her gaze back to her phone and continued dreaming among her afternoon treats, now and then sailing through her picture gallery and the D-Stop app aimed at Deltron's young women. From her face was revealed a glowing lust that looking at the pictures had made her shine with, and the dream memories of the evening with Max and Rajaporti. She turned herself in the chair while Dev worked, screwing the attachment ports of the hand projector into place. In her mind she waited for the evening. That soul connection that the synchronization program produced in mental visuals and in the limbic nervous system, which that man had created in the deepest subconscious premises of her neural network. It had changed direction in Linda, in those things she considered self-evident, in what she felt about herself. She thought about that moment when Max held her while they left Rajaporti's dance floor. How she squeezed that determined hand that took her from the middle of the flashing lights toward the booth while disco droids served drinks to customers, feeling nothing toward them, squeezing Max's hand as if afraid that something she believed in would disappear unless she held onto it so tightly. He had jumped onto the Sector 6 SkyTrain to go home to rest for a while. Linda left Dev's back room, and at the same time they both thought about each other without knowing anything about it. Max texted Linda, "Babe, I'm going home to rest for a while. If you want, we can meet a little earlier." The GUI beeped in Linda's matrix because of the message Max had sent. Her heart jumped when a message she had not known to expect came from exactly the man she had been thinking about. She felt excitement and answered, "Let's go to the fashion show today." Dev suggested it. "It's in the evening. We can meet earlier, just the two of us, if you want." "All right, that sounds good." Max stubbed the cigarette against a metal armrest and dropped it onto the train's aluminum floor. On the adjacent seat behind him, someone drank Depris special beer, burping, but Max did not interfere with it. He was in a good mood and looked through the train window at a line of clouds, while the hum of the engine calmed his ears. Life seemed to be going well. He opened the GUI news broadcast and began watching Channel 54's broadcast from Deltron. The snowstorm intensified and whipped the SkyTrain's hollow windows, from which the advertisement feed of the high plateau skyscrapers glittered. It warmed the heart in love, a heart that waited to meet something that had shaken his world. Above the train seats was an LED panel that ran the full length of the carriage. On it, warning notices for possible dangerous situations rolled in red text. In the middle of the passenger compartment were monitors showing short animated films for the joy of the passengers, in which animal characters rioted comically in farm landscapes. Max beeped Linda's matrix. "I'm coming straight to Central City. Would coffee taste good?" Linda floated in a hanging chair on Nano Studio's balcony, where she had withdrawn to dream and stretch time by herself, while Dev hammered the CyberArm plugs into place. "That works," she answered. "I know one good place. Shall we meet in half an hour at the station?" A duck character ran after a rabbit that had teased it by stealing the duck's nesting supplies. Max glanced at the screen. "Deltron looks beautiful today," he thought. 15 minutes and the train would be there. He turned the ear monitors louder and sank into the world of jazz, dreaming his thoughts. Had he ever thought that anything would truly change? It felt that what he had longed for had nevertheless come unexpectedly, after he had searched for it in virtual matrices, in chat cities and game windows looking for a common tune. So did everyone else who had been left alone in a city that cared only about itself in its clockwork, where the hierarchies of needs were fulfilled only for those who knew how to close their eyes into a monotrack that traveled its own road without seeing others as real. Tickets for sale, tickets for sale. Do you want paradise? Buy your way into the future. A megalotto seller dressed in golden and silver fabric clothing stepped into the train carriage waving a raffle ticket strap in his hand, sparkling plastic slips making a rustling sound. "Would you like to buy? Maybe luck will favor you better." Max looked at him thoughtfully. "Only one microcredit." The seller smiled suggestively. Max grabbed the first ticket that hit his hand. He tore it off, making the rest of the barcode visible as the brake surface released heat, and scanned it with the eye optics reader. The GUI showed an explosive congratulatory animation for participating in the intergalactic megalotto. "Good luck in the game." Max threw the slip onto the floor and turned again to look from the train window at the city's skyscraper horizon, between whose walls the SkyTrain rode toward Sector 7 station, Central City. Linda sat beside the cafe lounge kiosk, sipping her extra caffeinated latte and waiting for the arrival of her crush. She twirled her hair girlishly while leaning her shoulder blades against the edges of the chair. She looked happy. Cafe was by the street, whose lane had a lit high-level pedestrian way and a magnetic road crossing its boundary. Valuable-looking levitation cars slid along the road, bragging with their wealth. Linda liked it. It produced elegance in her life that she knew how to cherish, knowing that even the most superficial shine is part of energy echoing into eternity. She was not jealous. She was part of a larger machine, and the same person could not sit in every place. That is what she thought. That is what she experienced. An infrared heater tube heated the back of Linda's neck as she sat in her chair, the only discomfort she knew how to experience in her life at that moment. Linda opened the GUI to beep Max. The interface answered user input immediately and brought up recommended contacts. Linda selected Max, whose name she had set as Soldier Boy. "Hey, where are you going?" "Hola, Linda. I'm almost there in Central City. Where are you?" "Great. I have a surprise for you. See you soon. I'm outside at Cafe Lounge by the Magnetic Road. You'll find it with GPS. I'm sitting outside here." "Excellent. I'll come there soon." Max closed the GUI and opened the GPS locator to walk to Linda at the cafe. He walked along the lit street in the snowfall, listening to jazz music and relaxing into the thought that soon it would be nice. He would get to enjoy the company of a human being in meat space. Max startled from his thoughts when a speeder rushed at a megalomaniac speed over the edge wall of the magnetic road, rising above his body, and he felt a great downward pressure on his shoulders. A drone flashed quickly and began following the speeder. It was an illegal move that would cost a few thousand credits to the surface speeder, who had wanted to brag with his power in the wealth of Central City. Max continued walking lightly through the snow, almost as if greeting those coming toward him with his being, as he experienced greatness and love. Small lights flashed around the edges of snow-covered marble flower pots, and children had built miniature snowmen on their edges, taking a shortcut toward the magnetic road, guided by augmentation. He switched it off for a moment and deviated from the route to the bank of a stream carrying riverboats, paved with shiny black tiles. He saw a stall whose edge had 7 decorative eggs. They glittered with their decorations in the darkness lit by street lamps and by the stall's small red lamp. The seller was a long bearded man with glasses, dressed in a black decorative robe and a black turban. In the background, guitar music played in the spirit of oud, which Max heard faintly behind his own jazz recording. He looked into his pocket. The cigarettes were finished. 1 pack of Terramount cigarettes, he said. The man handed over a pack without saying anything and pointed to a sign he raised. 10 microcredits. Max paid for the cigarettes and thanked the seller, who swept the air in a sun greeting in front of his own face. Max returned to augmentation guidance. He began walking, following the thin green line opening before his eyes, while at the same time reading text explaining what was where. Sites, bazaars, street names, and pop-up advertisements. He walked for a while more, after which he crossed the crosswalk. On the other side of the road was Café Lounge, where Linda sat. He saw cult members raising their hands toward the sky and chanting, "Sacaritos, Sacaritos, Sacaritos, Sacaritos." Linda looked Max in the eyes, smiled gently and turned her upper body, adjusting her chest better toward Max. "Hey boy." Linda flirted involuntarily with masculine-looking Max, who had just by chance dodged children running on the street. "Hey," Max said to Linda receptively. Max sat on the bench along the street lane cafe beside the heater. He felt peace, but he was used to the fact that when someone opens their mouth, peace breaks. That was his experience of people, whom he had avoided for years. As an operator, there was not much need to talk. All business, all protocol, nothing personal. For a moment he felt vulnerable just before Linda grabbed onto the feeling. "Do you want to go to Laser Zone? I think it would be nice to go there with you. Dev is putting things together, but we can go there together before that." Max smiled gently. It felt childish to him, but weren't you supposed to do something silly on a date? It was not a clear thought, rather a feeling he experienced in his archetypes about what he had lost after isolating himself and ending up coding at a display terminal. For a moment he felt a strange flattening, but looked again at Linda, who made him smile and feel excitement. "Let's go." He did not dare immediately say that he had been there before as a teenager with a group of boys playing. He was not the best player, but a star in his own class, who had enjoyed every moment in that freedom, that boyish life was at its best. Carefree and free, without restrictions. "We used to go there as kids with friends." Max opened his mouth. He was afraid he sounded boring and over-rational. "So did we," Linda answered. Linda took Max by the hand and turned toward him, starting to walk with her back in the direction of travel, hopping a little girlishly. Max was cautious. Even though he liked that girl, he felt that something held that woman back. A charming form that hid a secret and sorrow that everyone in Depris carried for different reasons. It was normal, but Max had learned to consider those things important, and did not belittle the significance of fragmented pasts that walked in the nights to the rhythm of the steam engine of the automation machine, in body minds, that Deltron had produced. Broken families, lonely solos, karma dumpers brainwashed by cults, criminals and fortune seekers. He did not want to be any of them. He longed for a home on which life could be built safely in the neon jungle, and on its edges in winter parks, theme parks, and cafes, as a father of a family. A father who enjoys home and the stream of life together with wife and children. Now it was possible, he almost dared to think. But he knew Linda was not sure about all of this, and did not know his intentions. He saw a girl searching for life far away in cyberspace in eternal oscillation, detached from the world, into the world of plugs and neurofeeders, into the matrix. The nexus was that road, but he himself too had longed for the same, eternal life and freedom, the materialization of beauty into the biological gray shell as neurons receive directly fed signal, detached from Depris and its shit. "What do you think about the nexus?" Max asked Linda, when she had calmed down and was again walking together in the direction of travel, swaying. "It is a connection and code that Greta Fisher coded as a neural network to be used together with metal." "With metal?" "Dev knows those things. With his relays he can scan every chemical and body cell and give input into them from any direction. The only thing is Dev can't code, and nobody can like Greta. Max looked aside. He thought there was no code he could not make. At least there had not yet been. He knew how to code every button on an info automaton server, system architect all elements together and give the prompt to make finish loop from the data. He knew how to compartmentalize the segments of every problem into place and connect them into one information stream, from eye-optics to cyber arms and neural links. System architecture was his relays. It was easy for him, and from it he felt love. Logos love. It was digital love toward logic, code, and information systems. He was not indifferent toward people. They were simply unreliable, deceitful, and narrow-eyed, each on their own track seeking their own advantage. Max gave charity from the salary paid by his guild work every month to the Organization for the Homeless of Depris, but did not himself participate in the activity. That side of him was naive, and he could not participate in something like that, or it would be followed by derailing from the tracks of his own life. At least that was what he feared. He had nothing against people. He just knew that those living in their bubbles cared only about their own soaps or bathwaters, in which they could be happy, or otherwise only units of their own lives, without seeing the larger picture. Linda continued, Dev knows the body and machine. He can drill you new holes and plug you into the server if you want. Max smiled with a smile that reminded Linda that Max did not need new plugs. We need you, Max, to find Greta. She is hiding somewhere in the dark net and in the data streams of the info automata. She has the code to the Nexus. You can go into the data centers and find Greta's message and locate her. Message? She doesn't want to be found easily. Max lit a cigarette. They had already stopped by the river beside the Laser Techno Hall, whose yard was occupied by large groups of young people. You want eternal life, right? Linda leaned against the railing while Max thought deeply about why he had started this. Maybe, he answered. What does it cost me? Listen, you need to get a connection to Greta. As reward, you get your own server and the Nexus. Linda seemed indifferent as she lowered her head toward the river, while Max took a drag from his cigarette. He relaxed. Okay, I can help you. I want to get the server ready in my apartment before I do anything. Don't worry, Dev explains everything. He can build it for you. We have money saved. The Neuromatrix replicator is your reward. You get it if you find the code and Greta. Max looked down the river when a pistol sound came from behind. He was immediately in a state of readiness and instinctively pressed Linda behind his back with his left hand. Linda took cover against Max's body, following a carnal instinct. A magnetic car left the place. Nobody had been injured. Max turned toward Linda and was silent for a moment. He looked into the girl's innocent eyes with a powerful gaze that made Linda forget everything around them. She seeks safety. For the first time in her life, Linda felt safety in the Deltron night. Not the kind she usually felt, a carefree adventurer. No, it was a feeling that stopped time and blurred the gaze of the one experiencing it. She felt she was at home beside a man who was ready to save her life when danger threatened. Linda was embarrassed. She was not a user. Max got his own after all. He only needed to find Greta and get the Nexus. But Linda had fallen in love. That she had to admit. She had fallen in love, and now it embarrassed her more than anything. The doors of the Laser Techno Hall opened as Max and Linda walked inside. The marble surface of the floor and latex seams decorated the large lobby where the entrance counter was located. On both sides of it were spiral stairs to the upper plateau, where Max and Linda were headed. There was a bar designed for adult taste, from which one could see down to the game level. "What would you like?" said a disco droid with an accent resembling an English gentleman. It was metal, and on its neck was a bow tie, as a mark of a bar droid. "A beer for me. What would you like?" Linda browsed the touchscreen on the counter. "Mojito." The droid poured draft beer into a pint and handed it to Max. It continued mixing the mojito into a glass, adding rum, finally placing a lime wedge on the edge of the glass and handing it to Linda. "Beautiful," Max said. "Thank you." Linda smiled. They walked to a table from which they could see down to the game level and peeked down. There were 4 teams in the game, and they competed in a deathmatch-style match to survive on the playing field, while new barriers descended from the ceiling to cover the course. On the boundary walls of those barriers were infrared lights that activated sensors attached to the players' warsuits, and thus limited the area smaller and smaller, all the time. "The Nexus is a road to eternal life." Max looked Linda in the eyes, and turned his head to the side almost reflexively. accepting and at the same time feeling doubt. They assume so, he thought in his mind. He was not paranoid and he did not doubt what they said as such. They only assume so, played in his head. Could it be true? The first player dropped from the game when a red team player fragged the leader of the yellow team. Now they were on their own, without a figurehead. The blue team pressed the yellow team from the side and quickly mowed down every player while at the same time getting a good area of the field for itself. You don't seem to be listening to me. Max had become lost in his own thoughts. Even though he listened to Linda, he looked as if he were in his own thoughts, not concentrating at all on what was happening in the environment. Sorry. He smiled gently, which broke the ice, and Linda felt again that Max was following her, while she sipped her mojito again. Linda went silent for a moment, which woke Max from his own bubble. You look thoughtful. Dev was busy in Nano Studio's cyber laboratory, where he was installing new software into an eye-optic sensor. He wanted to visit the Sector 7 info automaton to load the news stream into his consciousness. He did that once a week, in case Greta Fisher had put something into the info automata that he and Linda followed. He left his factory and walked to the lobby elevator, the elevator from which he traveled to his own parking garage. From there, he traveled to street level. No, he did not awaken the smallest feeling in the others around him. They did not notice him. Dev was dressed in a black-green leather jacket and black trousers. He wore thick augmentation VR glasses on his head when outside, covering his personal but sculptural round and wrinkled face. On one hand he had a gray glove with which he twisted the accelerator of his Dragon's gravitron engine, and around his neck an amulet whose center held a turquoise calcite stone. I'm going to the automaton. Let's see if anything is found there. All right, when you're done, send me a message. I want to know where we are, Linda. Linda sat opposite Max. She switched the optics GUI off and looked at Max. Max continued, do you know what evil is? It isn't only darkness and ignorance. Not to me. It is when one sees the light but rejects it, chooses or does not choose but rejects, is indifferent, as if it did not exist. What do you mean? Max's words met something in Linda that had always been in her. The truth is in us. It resonates in every information bit in our body. It is continuous. It does not disappear. It is inside, except if one rejects it. You asked if I want to live forever? Yes, I want to, but the truth in me says that it is not in Deltron, Linda. So you don't want to continue? Linda looked frozen. I want to help you because it helps us. Darkness is not only darkness, it is invisible light. Of course, Linda said, without exactly knowing what she said. The game teams continued fragging on the battlefield, while Linda looked at Max sympathetically. I think I still know what you mean. She drank the mojito through a straw, while a wordless connection prevailed in the moment. We could leave soon. It whipped the magnetic road whose automatic heating melted it quickly. They had a journey to the Putka fashion show. Let's order a sky cab. I can set the Dragon to travel home on automatic control. Wait, I'll beep a taxi. They stood beside each other in the yard of the Laser Techno Arena, while Linda took Max by the hand. A moment passed. Go ahead and smoke. It's your way. A sky cab landed in the yard of the Laser Techno Arena. It was a blue taxi with black square stripes on its side. Deltron Sky Cabin Incorporation, whose automatic control was handled by a mech droid wearing a blue taxicab. To Putka. There's a fashion show there. They looked at each other excitedly. Part 2, Chapter 1. Putka. Gregor Malkov sat at his work table on the upper deck of Ariel Prime Corporation. At the upper roof of Skyscraper Hell, where only private lines for the company's own personnel transport corps moved. Top management. He had summoned his subordinates there so that he could personally hear their views of the current situation and see their frightened faces. Leave. Except you. He pointed at Idris al-Zahir, who was responsible for the virtual city in the Nexus core. You stay. Ariel Prime's upper deck was above the cloud horizon, and the sun shone there as Gregor opened the automatic dimming blinds, revealing the majestic cloud layer and the fixed star under which Tellus 81 traveled, Ares 5. Vespera is planning something, Idris thought in his mind. Why else would Gregor have asked him to stay? He stood silently at attention in front of the leader's work table, dressed in a gray robe and hood. On his feet he had leather shoes. Beldarusha needs updates. Has recruitment moved forward? Rex has not returned with his new friends. We have, however, gotten a message through, Idris said in a calm voice. Abu Zahira, he thought. They are in danger. They sat silently in the back of the skycab while Deltron rose before them among neon skyscrapers in the snowstorm. Linda put on an augmentation lens with which she saw a beautiful tropical landscape from the other window. Max sat on the side onto which tropical rainforests, waterfalls, and flying lizards were reflected. On the other side was Deltron. "Where did you hear about the Nexus?" Max asked Linda. "I heard about it already as a little girl." Linda's head jerked, like a glitch, after which she turned her head toward both shoulders to stretch her neck. "How could you hear about it already as a little girl?" Max asked, astonished. "You have always searched for Greta." "Yes, it is my obsession in this city. There is no way out if you're otherwise." She turned her head toward Max and looked him in the eyes. But the atmosphere became gentle as Linda noticed Max. "Dev and I have always searched for Greta and the Nexus." "I'm hungry," Max said. The skycab landed in an aircraft slot of Putka's magnetic parking area. A large domed stadium was in front of them, on whose megalomaniac logo read, Deltron Putka, 285. In its yard were stalls and food bars where pedestrians went to satisfy their needs. "You can get slices over there." Max paid the skycab. "Have a good day and we hope you enjoy your stay. Deltron Skycabin Corporation thanks you for the journey." "Pizza. I could settle for a slice," Linda said. "I'll take one too." The Pizza U stall was a small stall with old Italian-style upholstery and a green neon sign. "2 slices. Vegetarian and pepperoni." The pizza stall seller said nothing. He nodded in the usual way and took 2 cardboard cups. Rectangular cardboard boxes into which 1 slice fit well. He placed 2 pieces onto their own plates and handed them to Max. "There." He gave the other box to Linda. "That makes 4 microcredits." Max swiped the reader, and the transfer payment showed green in his GUI. "Let's go sit," Linda said. "Let's go." Linda noticed that Max was a little stiff. His introversion was the reason for it. They walked to a park bench and sat down. "Good." He took a bite of his vegetable pizza. Linda smiled. Her deep gaze stopped the world. It was evening, but Deltron's park birds still chirped in the trees of the park. "Dev will come soon. I'll beep him the location." Linda pressed with her finger on an invisible interface that sent Dev a location ping. Only a moment passed before Dev answered. "I'll be there soon. I borrowed a car." Linda read the message and smiled, gave a small laugh and became serious. Max looked at Linda, but said nothing. "We have a car today. We get to go driving." Linda took Max by the hand. He felt arousal from Linda's gesture, but did nothing. Lines of skyscrapers flashed before Dev's eyes while he drove a Herd 2000 flying car on automatic control toward Putka. He could not wait for Brandy Lola and Marisa Libanow. Dev dreamed, but heard a voice. "You are still the same person." He saw a glitch in the interface and blinked his eyes. "Cool." The lights of the dome approached Dev as the spinner flew toward the parking area. It landed spectacularly into place. Linda and Max saw it. "I wonder if that's Dev," Linda said. Max laughed when Dev got out of the car. He looked cool, cooler than Zerka's yellow light panel. It was because of Linda.